Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist. I have a question for you guys. How much new music do you guys listen to? And I mean new music, music that came out in 2024. Let's use 2024 as an example. How many new albums do you listen to? And out of those albums that you listen to, how many of them did you continue to listen to? I mean, you listened to it once, okay, that's that. But how many albums did you keep coming back to for months? Maybe you listened to it a whole bunch, you didn't listen to it for a month, then you came back to it. So how many records were there from 2024 that you came back to on a regular basis? Like when you were a teenager, when I was a teenager and I got Number of the Beast, man, I listened to that record probably for the next 6, 7, 8 years straight. You know, I was constantly listening to the stuff that I bought. I'm asking this question because, you know, I just made my top 5 of 2024. And I kind of felt bad that I only did 5. And somebody even in one of the comments was like, boy, you're lazy, you know, for only doing 5. And I replied to the guy, and I do feel the same way. I listen to a ton of music. I listen to a lot of music. Look at the video I did on my stats from Apple Music. I just don't listen to a lot of new music. What I tend to listen to, and I kind of feel bad about that, you know, in past years, when it comes to the end of the year, I'm kind of like, oh man, you know what? There really isn't a lot of new stuff that I've been listening to. And I feel kind of bad about that. But then it's not the case of that I'm just sitting here listening to Number of the Beast and Holy Diver over and the same records I was listening to when I was 14. That's not the case. I mean, I still listen to those records, but when it comes to new stuff for me, it tends to be older bands that I'm just discovering. Like, for instance, I'm going to be making a record haul video, and this is a great example of it. Leather Nun. They're a band from Jacksonville, Florida. They released this, I think it's like a private press. This is a reissue. 80s, I don't even know what year it is. Don't have my glasses on. Mid 80s or something like that, traditional metal. I get way more excited about stuff like this than a lot of the stuff that is coming out today. And I have to ask myself, why is that? Why am I not that interested in a lot of the music that's coming out today? Why does this grab my attention more than... Why am I listening? I probably listen to this as much as I listen to Bruce's Mandrake Project, all right? And I gave that album a really great review. I really liked that record. It landed in my top 5. But honestly, there's a lot of that stuff. Like when I was making my top 5, I kind of felt bad at the end that, you know, somebody commented, oh, I'm surprised the new Deep Purple wasn't in there. You really like that record. And it's true. I do really like that record. But I think what happens is, and in my top 5, it was sort of skewed heavy to albums that I'm listening to currently, like the Opeth, Last Will and Testament, the Cure album. And because what happens is like, same thing happened to me with Judas Priest's Invincible Shield. I was really into it for like 2 weeks, and then I didn't really listen to it again. I didn't really come back to it. I maybe came back to it like once again, maybe like a month later, and listened to it like once or twice, and then I haven't listened to it for months. Same thing with the Deep Purple. I really liked the Deep Purple, was really into it. And then the problem with the Deep Purple was I found it very fatiguing on my ears. It was very compressed, and so it kind of made me like, I just kind of didn't feel like going back to it. And so it's like I have these bursts, oh, this is a great album, I love it. And then I don't feel like going back to it. I don't really listen to it again. Maybe it's my fault, but I don't feel like forcing myself to listen to something that I don't feel like listening to. You know, again, it's not a case that I don't listen to music. I listen to a lot of music, but there's only so much time in the day. And I find myself reaching for stuff like this or this. I just got this last weekend. I find myself reaching for stuff like this before I reach for something that just came out, some new, even if it's from a band that I really, really like. And I'm not sure why that is. I mean, I think part of it is that I find this way more sort of interesting. I like discovering... I've never heard this band before. I get this record. Kind of like, this is, I think, 1990 or 89. So it's kind of like late 80s thrash, kind of technical a little bit. And I find this way more interesting because even though especially like with this record. It's not the greatest produced record in the world. Playing's a little sloppy, but the fact that it feels like I'm unearthing and digging up some sort of treasure, if you will. And even though there may be flaws to it, I'm able to view it through a historical lens and go, wow, this was like when metal was happening. This stuff was new, man. These guys were trying to make it on their own here. You know, there was no internet. There was no anything not a lot to look back at that point. You know, I don't know what year this is. I don't know my glasses, probably like 85 or 86 or something. You know, there wasn't that much history at that point. And so these guys were kind of right there. And I often say when it comes to stuff like this, I feel like I'm in a museum. And when you go into a museum, let's say you see an old shield or an old Viking helmet or something, right? Real thing, you know, that they dug up out of the ground somewhere. You look at that and you go, wow, man, I can't believe so long ago somebody wore that. Might have wore it into battle and it's so cool. You don't look at that and go, oh, they could make it much better today. Look at that, thing's a little crooked there, and you know the helmet, the one eye is a little bigger than the other. I mean, you don't think that because you're just more about wow, this was from back, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and this tool or what is primitive tool or whatever. You're like, wow, you know, they were trying to make these things right there and they're trying to figure this out and this is what they came up with and this was used by somebody 1,000 years ago or whatever. And that's kind of the way I view this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, it may not be as slick as stuff that we have today, but there's a charm to it for me. There's an innocence to it that I really, really like. And so I find it way more interesting listening to stuff like this. Whereas when I listen to a lot of modern stuff, first of all, I find the production to be, in general, very fatiguing, very tiresome. Just made a video of Opeth's Last Will and Testament, which was number 2 on my top 5. I think the production on that one is great, but that's sort of an exception to the rule. In general, the production tends to be very fatiguing. Invincible Shield, for instance, the guitars just have this sort of samey sound to them through the whole record. The drums are probably triggered. Everything's played to a click. It's computers, cutting, pasting, quantizing, compressing, triggering, trimming, all this other stuff. And it just makes it sound very, very boring to me. And and even though I can get into it for a little while and I am excited about it, I tend to not come back to it. And so that goes back to my original question. Like for you, are you experiencing this same thing? And are there records that you come back to? Has there been something that's come out in the last, let's say, couple years, in 2024 or 2023, that you listened to and it turned into a record like when you were 14, whoever your favorite bands were, you know, me with like Priest and Maiden and stuff, where I was just constantly listening to those. I was always I never I wouldn't go a month without listening to Iron Maiden or Number of the Beast. Are you kidding me? You know, I had to listen to Let There Be Rock or something like that. I mean, those records were in heavy regular rotation basically from 1980 till I started to drift away from metal until 1989, and it just doesn't happen for me anymore. And again, I feel bad when the end of the year rolls around, but I've started to say to myself, you know what? I don't feel bad about it anymore. It's not my fault. If I'm not interested in newer things, that's just what it is. I enjoy finding and discovering old bands that I've never heard before. Classic, cult, underground 80s metal bands. I've even said to myself, what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to do something halfway through the year and at the end of the year of my top newly discovered bands, I guess I could say it that way. Bands like these artists that I showed you here, these obscure 80s metal bands, because I've probably listened to this as much as I've listened to Bruce's new album. And I like Bruce's new album. It's not that I don't like Bruce's new album. It's just that I don't feel really excited. Like I'm not listening to Bruce's new album or Invincible Shield. I'm not listening to it like every other day or a couple times a week. I'm not doing it. I'm sort of really into it for a few weeks and then I'm done. And maybe I come back to it one more time at some point, and then it just sort of fades away. Like Iron Maiden's Book of Souls, for instance. It's like, can't remember the last time I listened to that. And I also felt bad in my top 5 list, where I think the ones that landed at the top for me, like Opeth and The Cure, I was questioning myself as just because these are the most recent albums that I listen to, and I tend to have this behavior pattern where I listen to the record a lot and I'm really into it. And then it's just like I forget about it. I maybe come back to it one more time, and then it just sort of it just goes away, and I just land up back in my comfort zone, which is the classic stuff and these newer obscure 80s metal bands. That's sort of my zone that I exist in the majority of time. New music makes up a small percentage of what I listen to. And I've tried in the past. I have Apple Music. There's a playlist like breaking metal, new metal, and stuff like that. And I go through the songs and I'm just like, oh, I have no interest in this. You might say, well, maybe you'd be into, people say, the new wave of traditional heavy metal. And I like a lot of those bands. I should be into that because I'm a huge traditional metal fan. But when I listen to it, I'd rather listen to this. This to me is like the real thing. They were doing it when it was happened. They were there, ground zero, as it was all going on. They were making it up as they went along, type of thing. Whereas this new wave of traditional heavy metal stuff, it seems like a reenactment in some way. Some of it. I mean, I haven't listened to all that stuff, and I was into that stuff for a little while, and then I really just got away from it and just never really went back to it again. But all right, let me know. Does anybody out there feel like I do? How much new music from, let's say, 2024 or the year before, have you listened to, liked, and kept returning to, that it stayed in a fairly regular rotation for you? Or are you kind of like me, where you hear stuff, you listen to it, you think, yeah, this is good, you listen to it a couple times, and then you just never come back to it? I mean, are you the same way? Let me know what it's like for you. Let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of my thoughts. Till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.